I'm sure most of you have seen this, but if not, this is the iconic opening cinematic for The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This game is known to be one of the best of the franchise, if not one of the best video games ever to be released. See, I was very young when this game came out and hadn't played previous iterations up to this point. The opening cinematic was very enthralling as well as inspiring to me. I wanted to know more about this land, about this game, and about this story. Not many games at the time did this for me. It was very rare that just an intro inspired me to play a game. This was one of the very few times it happened. It wasn't until another game in the franchise that this happened for me. A game that was inspired by Ocarina of Time, but took it to the next and darker level. I'm of course talking about The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. Today we're going to be doing a review, but also a homage to the game. We'll be splitting this video into two sections, first going over accolades, reviews, core changes to the game, as well as opinions from social media and the public. Then I'll share my personal views in this game, things that it did right, things that it did poorly, as well as reasons why I loved this game. I'll leave a timestamp on the video now to where you can skip to if you want to watch my personal views in this game. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review and homage to The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess, 12 years after its release. The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess was released in 2006 for both the Nintendo Wii as well as the Nintendo Gamecube. However, upon launch, the game actually had a split release date, first being released for the Wii on November 19th, 2006, and then almost a month later on December 2nd, 2006. The reason for this split release is because Twilight Princess was originally planned to release in December of 2005. However, Nintendo decided to hold off on releasing the game to polish it, and then eventually port it over to be a launching game for the Nintendo Wii. There was also a third installment for the game, being a 10-year anniversary remaster of Twilight Princess for the Nintendo Wii U. That was released on March 4th, 2016, but I'll go more on that in a moment. Sales upon release were incredible, being as the game was sold with nearly 3 out of every 4 Wii systems. Once the Gamecube version was released, within the first month it sold over 32,000 copies, and over the course of 3 months, the Gamecube version had sold over 1 million copies. Fast forward to 2015, and Twilight Princess had sold over nearly 8.85 million copies, being the best-selling game in the franchise at that point. It held the crown for a while, that is until The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild came out, and as of April 2018, Breath of the Wild has actually outsold Twilight Princess at over nearly 10 million copies sold. Twilight Princess still has the record of holding it the longest though. Reviews upon release were absolutely remarkable, scoring near perfect scores, with Metacritic giving the Wii version a 95 out of 100 and the Gamecube version a 96 out of 100. Many other outlets gave it perfect scores, such as Game Informer and Game Radar, and many publishers actually praised the game and were calling Twilight Princess, quote, one of the greatest games ever created. Not all reviews were perfect though, just as with any video game to be released. However, they weren't really large complaints, just minor nuisances, mainly in that some people disliked the Wii's motion control system, and that the shading was poor in certain aspects of the game, but I digress. Quick side note before we move on, surprisingly, many people didn't know this, but Twilight Princess was originally planned to be a sequel to The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. It was supposed to have the same style of graphics as well as continue the story from Wind Waker. However, unfortunately, with the lackluster sales in America, Aonuma decided to change the game. Many people in America stated their dissatisfaction with the game because of its cartoonish style and assumed the game was catered more towards children rather than adults. Because of that, unfortunately, sales were very poor, and at the beginning of development for The Wind Waker 2, Aonuma conversed with Miyamoto to change the overall style of the game to accommodate for the more realistic style of gameplay. Thus, we got Twilight Princess. So, okay, personal note, I'm gonna squeeze right in here real quick. Wind Waker was awesome, and because you cucks hated on it, they changed it, you son of a... Okay, like I said, I'm going to save my opinions for the second part of this video, but I do understand where people were coming from. Wind Waker was released right after Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, two games that were both iconic and had much more realism than Wind Waker, so expectations were high. Sure, it was a bummer, sales were poor, but I like to think of it this way. If Wind Waker didn't have poor performances, we never would have gotten Twilight Princess. Plus, eventually we did get a sequel to The Wind Waker in The Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, two games that personally I have never played, but know many others who love the games and express their enjoyment for them. Plus, on a happier note, the game actually grew onto people over time. Many people and critics who previously bashed on Wind Waker actually changed their statements, and the game is now considered by many to be a wonderful addition to the franchise. The game did also get an HD remake, but I mean, we'll talk about that in another video. I'm sure you all know what makes a Zelda game a Zelda game. Dungeons, boss fights, collecting items, saving someone, and defeating a final boss. This does not change in Twilight Princess whatsoever. But there were some changes though that were actually critical to the success of Twilight Princess. We'll start off with things that weren't changed first. But before that, I should probably talk about the differences between the Wii and Gamecube versions, because there were actually many changes that even I didn't know about until recently. First off, the Wii motion controls. With the introduction of the Nintendo Wii and bringing motion control to consoles, Nintendo of course wanted to include this in their games. In previous games, Link would attack using only a button, usually the B button. However, for the Wii version, the player would actually initiate Link's attacking animations by swinging the Wii remote and shaking the nunchuck. This of course made Link swing a sword, perform spin attacks, or protect with his shield. Exclusive to the Wii version was also the introduction of the pointer navigator on screen, indicated by a blue fairy, which oddly enough looks like Navi. Ugh. The Gamecube version of course stuck with the normal controls using the B button to attack, L to Z target, and R to block. However, one of the key differences to the game that even I didn't know about until recently was the choice to swap which hand Link wields his sword. For those of you that don't know, since the original on Nintendo, Link has always held his sword in his left hand and his shield in his right hand. Now, initially it doesn't seem like much, but considering most of the population on Earth is right-handed and the Wii remote was intended to be held in the right hand, Aonuma thought it would be odd for players to swing with their right hands, and then Link would swing with his left hand. Aonuma thought this would get confusing to players over time, causing frustration, and to accommodate for that, exclusive to the Wii version, the entire map and layout were flip-flopped from the Gamecube version. Meaning that the entire game, Hyrule, enemies and all, were mirrored from the Gamecube version. I personally didn't know this until recently, but that was because I grew up playing the Gamecube version. I had never played the Wii U version before. I first found this out thanks to Zelda Dungeon on Twitter talking about it some time ago. A fan brought it up and Zelda Dungeon informed them, and I was so confused, so obviously I delved into research mode. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't believe it at first, but when I actually looked into it and found it out, it blew my freaking mind! It's crazy how such a subtle change can affect a player's perspective on the game. Your memories of the game could be different than mine, and honestly, that's so cool. So now that that's out the way, let's talk about the actual game itself and things that weren't changed. See, this game is heavily inspired by Ocarina of Time. Many of the boss fights are renditions or mementos to previous ones in Ocarina, as well as many of the dungeons and even music tracks make appearances. This game obviously keeps the normal 8-dungeon aspect the Zelda games are known for. This game even has the notorious grass, fire, water temple scheme, which starts at the beginning of the game, and I'm sure everyone is familiar with that. The boss fights for the Light and Water Temples are basically the same boss fights for the Great Deku Tree and Water Temple in Ocarina, with their own twists. Again, reimagined. I'll delve more on this in the personal section though. Once again, we're on a quest to stop Ganondorf and save the Kingdom of Hyrule, and to do that, we need the legendary sword that seals the darkness. Nothing really has changed from previous Zelda games, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Those are stable aspects to the Zelda franchise, and even things that are carried over from previous games have their own unique twist or aspects that make them different. See, the gaming community is a very interesting one, because it's split into two views. You have the people who want the same game made over and over and over and over again, while the other half want new things or additions that weren't in previous iterations of the game that change what you previously knew about said game. It's either nostalgia or groundbreaking innovation, and unfortunately, you can't really have both in a single game. Sure, you could try, but more often or not, it'll sway heavily to one side. Twilight Princess tried this, but is more catered towards the nostalgia side, with all of these references towards Ocarina of Time. However, there were many additions to the game that actually did change it for the better and were pivotal to the success of Twilight Princess. For those of you who aren't aware or have a hazy memory of the story, basically, someone tells Zelda to leave, she says yes, and then he turns the castle into a spooky scenery straight out of Monster House, where then you have to tell him to leave. Honestly though, I'm not too far off. Zant, a descendant from the Twilight Realm, invades Hyrule Castle, forces Princess Zelda out, and starts to corrupt the land of Hyrule with his own world. You and your companion Midna must then go on a long journey to find a rare relic that will help you save the world and defeat Zant. Along the way, of course, you find out that Zant isn't the main source of evil after all, and is in fact a pawn for Ganon, where then you and Ganon have a final duel at the end. The crazy thing about the story is that the game is actually dark. And I mean like, dark. The game has an overall very somber feeling, and is almost as if a blanket of sadness has just covered the entire game. Characters are moping around, scared for their lives and afraid for what's to come. The children from your village who you're meant to save are almost killed, and even Princess Zelda's fate is a tormenting one. Now, Ocarina wasn't really that dark. Majora's Mask, however, is possibly the darkest game in the franchise, but Twilight Princess took this to a different level with the iteration of including basically horror aspects into the game. The creatures of Twilight were terrifying, and seeing them for the first time and the music that revolves around them and the actual Twilight itself adds even more suspense and an overall fear aspect to it all. Once the Twilight takes over, many of the people are turned into floating spirits where they are stuck, inevitably, and are unaware at times. Creatures infested the land of Hyrule, making it so that sometimes you'd randomly encounter them in your journey. Basically, fear around every corner. Upon the invasion of Hyrule, however, is the inclusion of an acquaintance who accompanies Link on his journey. I'm of course talking about Midna. She's basically this game's Navi, only extremely less annoying and very bossy. Her addition to the story was remarkable, and the lore around her is amazing as well. Once a princess of Twilight, she was overthrown by Zant, who placed a curse upon her, making her become the imp she is now. The entire story for her is finding a way to break the curse and restore herself to the original form. She had little care for the Hylians, but over time grew to appreciate them. Although she was a companion to Link, she was arguably the strongest character in the entire game. She had excellent character development. I mean seriously, she almost dies, and when I saw the part of Princess Zelda sacrificing herself to save Midna, my 10-year-old mind was blown. Was it 10? I don't remember, it was so long ago. Midna is just very iconic for the game, and majority of people resonated and loved her, and rightfully so. Move over, Navi, there's a new queen in town. I personally liked Fi just a little more than Midna, but shh, don't hate me. One new addition to the game, arguably the biggest addition to the game, was the fact that Link could actually become a wolf in this game. Link, upon entering the Twilight areas, and eventually by your own choice, has basically his genes altered and becomes a wolf. A badass one too, I might add. Wolf Link's form came with many benefits that were different from his Hylian form, mainly in the fact that Wolf Link has a faster walking speed than normal Hylian Link. He also has the ability to sniff trails, find pose, and even the option to teleport at times. Some downsides were the weakened attacks and the loss of using items. All those beautiful items you collected on your journey, yep, can't use them. Also, if you interacted with people in Wolf Link's form, they would be terrified of you and run away screaming. Please, I just want some pets on my forehead. Early on, Wolf Link is used basically to restore the land around you. To do that, you collect the Vessels of Light, which you then turn into the Goddess, and then that restores the land around you back to normal, and everyone and yourself become Hylians again. It's basically required to progress further in the dungeons as Hylian Link. Many people found that the early stages of Wolf Link were very tedious, but it gets better later on when you have the ability to transform at will. Wolf Link is basically required to complete certain dungeons later on, and it was actually really cool. I'm glad to see that a new addition to the game wasn't thrown away halfway through. Lord knows it's required to 100% the game. Other things new to Twilight Princess were the improvements and additions to combat, mainly the hidden skills and the horseback combat. In this game, upon Wolf Link form, Link could find Howling Stones hidden around Hyrule, where once correctly matching the tone to the song, a glorious golden wolf would appear and tell Link to seek him out in Hylian form. Indicated with a little golden wolf icon, Link, once in human form, would seek out the wolf, and upon finding him, it would lunge at Link and cause him to become unconscious. Once regaining consciousness, however, Link would appear in front of what seems to be a Stalfo, only to be taken aback and find that this skeleton was once a legendary warrior. This warrior would teach Link hidden skills that affected his combat and gave him special ways to dish out damage. The only required skill is the final blow, where upon knocking an enemy out, Link does a crazy front flip, stabs the creature in the chest, and delivers the final blow. There were 8 hidden skills, all optional, but they were definitely worth seeking out. Another addition was the improvement to the horseback combat. Aonuma decided to improve on this since they really couldn't in Ocarina of Time, and added more elements to fighting while in Epona. The bow, of course, could be used as in previous Zelda games, but also Link could finally pull out his sword and attack on either side of him. You could even do spin attacks, which was cool, but very I guess. Many fans found that the horseback combat was very clunky and the controls were awkward to use. The Wii version didn't really help either. Swinging your sword side to side felt very limited and the reach wasn't very far either. Spin attacks worked, if the enemy was basically shoulder to shoulder with you. The bow was odd as well. You could aim well on Epona's back, but she'd more often or not move at the wrong time and cause you to miss. It was very frustrating. While it was cool in concept, I feel it just wasn't executed properly. Though this was remedied in Breath of the Wild's horseback combat. So at least they got it right eventually. One other addition before we move on was the huge upgrade to the Land of Hyrule. It was the biggest Hyrule field up to date, 5 times larger than Ocarina of Time's Hyrule field. So large that in fact, not only was Epona basically necessary to traverse the land, teleportation was implemented so that Wolf Link form, or if Epona wasn't around, could allow you to get around easier. There were 6 provinces included to break down the map of Hyrule: Ordona, Faron, Eldin, Lanayru, as well as the desert and peak provinces. This offered different scenery depending on where you were at in the game. Lanayru was open with fields and lakes, while Eldin was rocky and mountainous, and both Faron and Ordona had dense forests and little springs here and there. The desert province was a wasteland riddled with dangerous creatures and mysterious secrets, while the peak province was a barren, frozen tundra, uninhabitable by anything other than the Yetis. Many enemies flooded the land, but this also offered a meaning to explore the land around you. Many enemies often meant that there were secrets hidden past them in either heart containers, rupees, or even rare bugs or pose for collecting. There were also many areas somewhat cut off until you found the proper item needed to access said specific area, like the claw shot, the double claw shot, or even the spinner from the Sand Temple. The only downside to all this were the loading screens between zones. I mean, it kind of cut off immersion, but past the little quirk, Hyrule Field was an excellent improvement. Common reception from the game was very, very good. Being as this game came out 12 years ago, opinions from wait, hold on. 12 years ago, 2006. This game came out 12 years ago? I was 10 years old, oh my— I'm sad now. Okay, let's get back on topic. Social media wasn't as big of a factor back then as it is now. Sure, you did have platforms, but nothing was as predominant as social media now. I'm talking about you, MySpace, and Tumblr. Since social media wasn't as big back then, many people heard other opinions via word of mouth. I didn't have many friends who played the game back then, but those who did all agreed that it was awesome. Everyone loved it. Fast forward to now, the time this video is being made, and Twilight Princess is many people's favorite Zelda game. One of my best friends who hadn't really played a Zelda game growing up until recently fell in love with Twilight Princess. He loved how dark of a story it was and how chaotic everything seemed. People on social media feel the same. If you ask almost anyone what they love about the game, it's either Wolf Link, Midna, the aesthetics of Twilight, and then that one dude who loves the magic armor. I guess right now would be a good time to talk about that third iteration of the game I mentioned earlier. Yes, there was a third version of this game released on March 4th, 2016. It was the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD Remaster for the Nintendo WiiU. It took a lot of people by surprise because when Nintendo announced the Direct for November of 2015, everyone assumed it was going to be info on the new Zelda game. Well, like I said, a lot of people were shocked when the HD version was announced. There were many new things added as well, such as the functionality of amiibos, updated graphics and sounds, as well as a new endgame dungeon in the Cave of Shadows. See, this game mainly just beefed up the graphics and was somewhat changed for the Wii U's gamepad and such. The map and items were on the screen, as well as the option to change gear much more quickly. It was a nice touch, honestly. Also, the addition of amiibos greatly changed the game. Hero Mode, first introduced in Skyward Sword, made a return in Twilight Princess and basically made the game much more difficult. To add to the difficulty though, the corresponding Ganon amiibo actually quadrupled the amount of damage Link would take, making it one hell of a journey. I remember watching videos of people challenging themselves with Hero Mode and the Ganon amiibo. It was a good watch, made for some good times. Other amiibos had decent use, mainly in the replenishment of arrows and bombs, etc., but the main amiibo everyone wanted was the new Wolf Link amiibo. This amiibo added a new dungeon in the game called the Cave of Shadows. It was basically a much more difficult Cave of Ordeals, but was really fun and added even more challenge for veterans of the franchise. One other thing about the amiibo that people didn't know about until later was its tie-in with Breath of the Wild. See, depending on how far your progress was in Twilight Princess, your save data would store in the Wolf Link amiibo, and choosing to use the Wolf Link amiibo in Breath of the Wild would actually put Wolf Link in the game as a companion, and he would follow you around. The more hearts you had in Twilight Princess meant more health in Breath of the Wild. Once this was announced, of course, collectors scrambled even more to get this bad boy, and it honestly made for such great immersion. It was definitely one of the best remasters in video game history, without a doubt. To wrap up the unbiased part of this video before we head into my personal and biased views, I'll summarize it as this. If you're one who dislikes a chronological or linear story, this isn't the game for you. This might not even be the franchise for you. Zelda is built on its linear aspect, and that hasn't changed in years, until the most recent iteration of the franchise, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Which I totally will not plug my review of the game right here on screen in a large format, tempting you to check it out after this video is done. Oh no, I would never do that, you have my word. However, if you're a Zelda fanboy like myself, then this game will be right up your alley. It's the same thing as previous iterations, but with a different take on it. You'll find things you love, you'll even find things you hate, but it's definitely worth getting into or checking it out if you haven't. Like I said, there are many versions of this game to get. You can get the Gamecube version for that old school feeling, or the HD remaster for its revitalization. Either way, you'll have a great time playing this game. Definitely 10 out of 10, would recommend. This right here is the definitive moment that made me love Twilight Princess above all others. There is so much more happening here than you realize. Sure, it may just seem like a dude attacking a skeleton boy with a sword, but to me, it's the fabled hero of time learning an ancient technique only taught by the most skilled warriors in history. Traversing through time and space to meet a warrior to learn the skill is an incredible experience. The skill that I'm talking about is, of course, the Mortal Draw, the 5th hidden skill Link can learn. This attack is my favorite in the entire game, and I use it all the time. Basically, it's the all or nothing move. Link sheathes his shield and sword, leaving him defenseless and vulnerable to attacks. But when the enemy creeps ever so slightly closer to Link, Link will put his hand on the hilt of his sword. And at the right moment, the option to attack will proc, and Link will pull his sword out from its sheath in a circling forward slash, delivering the strongest attack in the entire game and defeating almost any enemy in one single hit. I mean, look at this! It's such a powerful and badass move, and I love it so much. What adds the cherry on top of this already delicious sundae is the lore behind all of this. See, this is the Hero's Shade, a warrior from a long time ago who possesses powerful skills he can teach Link. His story isn't delved on too much, and it almost seems as if he were just some random warrior, until a certain dialogue option appears. What you're seeing right now could possibly mean that this warrior is the fabled hero of time from both The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. This dude right here is the hero that we played in both of those games. The one who defeated Ganon, who could time travel and saved both Hyrule and Termina. This could be him. While it's not 100% confirmed, the dialogue heavily convinces us that it is, and I want to believe it. More lore depicts that as he grew older, Ocarina of Time's Link never passed down his skills he learned in his journeys, and died regretting it. So he came back as the Shade we see here. He says he can only pass down these skills to those carrying the hero's bloodline, meaning there's possibly more of a connection here than just the title of hero. All of this lore and sense of wonderment adds the best immersion, and is the main reason why for the longest time, Twilight Princess was my personal favorite above any other in the entire franchise. While there are many other cool things like this in the game, just as there are amazing things, there are lackluster ones as well. For example, the temples. The temples in this game are very bland to me, specifically the grass, fire, and water temples. They're just so for me. The grass temple was just extremely boring, and I remember when I played it for the first time, I just wanted to get it over with. And the fact that we needed the monkey's help to progress in the dungeon really just soured my experience. The fire temple was no different, although the parts where you needed to magnetize the iron boots and getting the bow were awesome. The water temples were lame altogether and had the typical Zelda stigma of water dungeons suck, minus the boss, however. But we'll put a pin in that and come back to it in a moment. However, after these three, the temples did get better actually. Solely based on the dungeon's puzzles and not aesthetics, the Ice Temple was my favorite. It was very unique in that it didn't necessarily have your typical lost and deserted castle flooded with enemies. No, instead, you're in some person's mansion and you need to help them recover a key to unlock their room in order for you to get the Mirror of Twilight. They do send you on a list of chores to collect or fetch items, but it was unique because you visited previous rooms as well as finding new hidden rooms that you had never seen before. Along the entire way as well, you'd find ingredients, which you'd then give to the husband to help him make a stew, which you then could take to give you health recovery along your way. While some people found it tedious, I personally enjoyed it. It was very heartwarming and different to be helping someone, rather than just trying to solely plow through enemies left and right. Now, based on aesthetics, the Temple of Time was my personal favorite. First, seeing the destroyed version, then going back in time to a restored temple was so awesome. I loved the futuristic feel as well as the old classic feeling, and facing off against the Dark Knight as a mini-boss was really awesome as well. Growing up and finding trivia on this temple made it so much more enjoyable. Did you know that the music was actually a remix of the Great Deku Tree from Ocarina of Time? Or how about the fact that the layout is similar to the Tower of the Gods from Wind Waker? Or even how about the fact that you can see the light medallion from Ocarina of Time scattered throughout the entire temple? Such cool facts just made me appreciate this temple more than I already did. The other temples, while not as poor as the grass, fire, and water temples, were decent. The Sand Temple was eerie and spooky, while the City in the Sky was very interesting, but not many of the temples in Twilight Princess really stood out compared to previous iterations. If I had to criticize Twilight Princess harshly, I think the temples would be the weakest point. However, there is a big but. There's a big but, alright, yeah. So to make up for the lackluster dungeons, the boss fights in this game are incredible! Some of the best in the entire franchise. Now, I mentioned earlier the Water Temple. While the dungeon itself is poor, the boss fight is awesome. So you walk in and realize basically it's the exact same monster from the Water Temple in Ocarina. You say to yourself, I know this enemy, I even know how to defeat it, this should be easy. Then midway the creature just says like, nope! And dives into the hole and erupts from the ground as a gigantic sea serpent. He swims around, crashing into pillars, causing debris to fall down that can injure Link. And the actual fight itself is so exciting, you feel like you're actually there. You have to hook shot onto its body at the right moment, and then Link attacks, and like the music is all the music too is it's so awesome. Oh my god. Yeah, it's pretty cool. The Fire Temple's boss was awesome as well. You enter a dark-lit room to see a creature shackled and bound by chains, only to watch it wake up, and the only way to actually defeat it is to wear your iron boots and pull its chain to make it fall to the ground, and then you attack its eye. It was a very good and enjoyable feeling. The boss fight for the Temple of Time, Armagoma, is a giant spider and is basically a throwback to many previous games. A link between worlds, Ocarina, Wind Waker, etc. But my favorite boss fight is Argarok from The City in the Sky. See, Argarok's fight had such a build-up, and it really made me eager to face him. First, you see him roaming around the temple, taunting you, letting you know he exists, and then when you finally open up the boss door, you have to climb up the tower, and once you reach the top, you find it's an open grassland with pillars. And then, he appears. The beginning segment is kind of fun, but the real cake is when half of his armor is destroyed. Full of rage, Argarok leaps into the sky, breaks the rest of his armor off, and summons basically a hurricane to the battlefield. The following fight is all about timing, aiming correctly, all while a dragon is spewing fire at you, and you can't even stand on the ground too long because the wind will knock you off. Claw-shotting from side to side while Argarok shoots fire is so intensive, oh my— Okay, hold on, Azul. Let's not get too overwhelmed again, settle down, dude. I feel this was perfectly executed, and it made this boss fight so enjoyable for me. First off, I love dragons, so check. Secondly, armor dragons? Check. Third, is it Volvagia though? I'll let it pass. This boss fight just overall made the temple 10 times better for me, and is without a doubt one of my favorite boss fights in Zelda history.
Azul, what are you doing, dude? You've been on about your dragon fetish for like 5 minutes, man. Come on!
Okay, you get it. The temples are blah, but the boss fights are incredible. They all perfectly coincide with the creatures that invade with the Twilight. Speaking of, the invasion of the Twilight was so powerful for the game. So you have your normal and familiar enemies like the Bokoblins, the Bulbins, Lizalfos, etc. But you also have this new enemy exclusive to Twilight Princess called the Twilight Messengers. See, they invade Hyrule with Zant in his conquest to overthrow the castle. The lore behind them is exquisite. Basically, they're corrupt Twilight from the Twilight Realm who turned into these monsters when they followed Zant into Hyrule. They're so powerful that they easily overtook all of Hyrule Castle, even though Zelda's warriors outnumbered them. What's crazy about all of this is that in Link's journey, he actually has to deal with both the normal enemies in the Zelda franchise, as well as the Twilight's messengers. You'll find them roaming around Hyrule, sometimes teleporting from the sky, and later on in the game, in certain dungeons. They usually travel in packs of 3, which makes them even more deadly. And the reason they're so difficult to kill is because they have the power to revive the other Twilight around them. If you kill one messenger, or even 2, the others will create an eerie and horrific howl that brings the others back to life. This extends the battle much longer, making it obviously more difficult to defeat them. These enemies aren't just your normal hack and slash ones. No, they require the proper perception, planning, and execution in order to defeat them, and that's what makes it so exciting to fight them. You could just be on your way through Hyrule, just all la-ni-na-ni-na, oh boy, I hope I don't find any Twilight, oh damn! And then they randomly teleport onto you, ensuing a battle. This added the more scary and dreadful feeling that made Twilight Princess more empowering than others. While Majora's Mask had the fear of wasting time, Twilight Princess added the more random fear factor of facing these creatures at any given moment. In addition, the music that ensues them is terrifying. The first time I heard the music, I freaked out galore and, without a doubt, cried. Yeah, I cried a lot, yeah. The Twilight really just added much more life to the game and is without a doubt one of the best additions to the Zelda franchise, period. Speaking of music, the music in Twilight Princess is just glorious. Definitely some of the best in the entire franchise. The Hyrule Field theme is very enthusiastic, and listening to it makes you feel triumphant, like you're trekking through some glorious revolt. At the same time, it offers this feeling of exploration, like the world is yours, and you should explore every inch of it. This is one of the few empowering tracks, however, because Twilight Princess has many other tracks that add to the ambiance of a dark and depressing game. One of the most iconic songs for this game that many people, myself included, love is Midna's theme, or Midna's Desperation, or Midna's Lament. It has many names, but the song that plays when Midna is literally dying on Wolflink's back, and you're running across Hyrule Field in the middle of the night during a thunderstorm as fast as you can to get to Hyrule Castle in order to save Midna, is just depressing and sad, but at the same time, beautiful and inspiring. There are many mixes on YouTube that include Midna's theme, or extended 30-minute versions, or there's even up to a 10-hour version that I saw, but it's just very clear that people love not only this song, but many of the songs in the entire game. I have many favorite tracks throughout this game, but my personal favorite is, without a doubt, the Hyrule Field theme at night. I really resonated with this theme because it adds to the beauty of the darkness ensuing Hyrule. The little hum, which sounds like a woman weeping, really just got to me. It's almost as if the entire world is just sad and wants this reign of terror to just finally end. I feel this track perfectly executes how somber Twilight Princess is. If I were to show someone who has never played the game before a single track of music to describe the game, it would be this one, without a doubt. See, for me, music is one of the most impactful things on whether or not I enjoy a certain game. You could have an amazing campaign that is a complete roller coaster and has a surprise ending, but if the music sucks, odds are it won't make an impact for me. For Twilight Princess, however, it nails both of these almost perfectly. We have an amazing story that is simple, yet invigorating, and absolutely gratifying music that just rings in your heart. The music is so beautiful for me that I've used many of the tracks from Twilight Princess as my ringtones on my phone since I was like 15. The Snow Peak Ruins theme is my ringtone for random phone calls, while the Ganon fight is my father's ringtone. My best friend Nate's The Lost Woods theme, and my mother's for the longest time was a track from Ocarina of Time, the Serenade of Water, but a few years ago I decided to change it to the Lake Hylia theme. Music has just resonated so well that I needed more of it in my daily life. It has made my experience an infinite amount of times more enjoyable than I ever could have imagined. I'm sure others can attest to this as well. So, let's talk about the overall story for just a second. The overall story of the game was really interactive and well executed. It made me want to know more. See, to me, it seemed like there were two arcs to the entire story. The first arc is basically from the start of the game to becoming human again and figuring out what the heck is going on, all the way through the first 3 temples, trying to save your friends, and up to the point where you finish the Water Temple and confront Zant for the first time. The second arc is basically after Midna is dying and you're trying to save her. That felt like you lost all of your progress and almost had to start over from scratch. And so the moments leading up to the Sand Temple and finding the Mirror of Twilight, to me, just really felt like the world opened up and everything seemed much more interesting. And then the bigger picture appeared. You're not only trying to save your friends now, but the whole world as well. I know I've stated this earlier, but the first dungeons were just so boring and I just wanted to get them over with, but that's aka, quote unquote, the first arc. However, the second arc, and basically every dungeon after the Water Temple, were just so incredible, because every time I finished a dungeon, I eagerly hurried my way to the next point of interest to learn what was going to happen next in the story. Which was crazy for me personally, because I normally are an explorer. I've always put the story as a secondary option, where my first option was to stray from the beaten path and find new things that aren't identified with a quest marker. See, I'm an explorer at heart. I love traversing and exploring the land. Finding and searching every nook and cranny for hidden secrets or points of interest are just pinnacle for me. Side questing and collecting items to upgrade is what I love most about gaming. But while Twilight Princess doesn't really have the upgrading part, it sure does have the collecting aspect. Bugs, hidden skills, wallet upgrades, pose, and yes, even the magic armor, all added for a greater experience than previous Zelda games. There was just so much to do and I adored every second of it. Besides the magic armor. Magic armor. Magic armor. Magic armor. Magic armor.
Ah, shut up!
Yeah, okay, the magic armor's stupid. There, I said it. For such a cool looking armor set, they really know how to disappoint. The entire long and tedious quest required to get the magic armor was just so disappointing in the end. For those of you who don't know why I'm complaining about the magic armor, basically, it's the pay-to-die armor set. The armor, when equipped, makes you impervious to all damage, and instead of wasting hearts when you get hurt, it drains rupees instead. It also, however, drains rupees every single step you take. Which sounds cool in concept, I do agree, but when you realize the amount of farming needed to keep a large amount of rupees on hand, it's just excruciating, because not only do you need rupees to buy items like arrows, bombs, and lantern fuel, now you basically have to pay to survive. If you run out of rupees, the armor turns black, and now you walk around like you're wearing the iron boots and lose hearts like normal. You're basically a turtle at this point. Which, like, sucks though. Like, really sucks. Like, really sucks. Because it's such a cool looking armor set as well. I mean, look at it. It really is cool, but it's such a waste. And I can't believe I went out of my way to record footage for all of you, so you better love this video! Besides the magic armor and the few little things, I overall love this game. It was indeed my favorite iteration in the Zelda franchise until Breath of the Wild came out. This game, however, has the best final boss in any Zelda game, and personally, for me, in any game in general. Every single time I play a game and face off against the final boss, I always find myself comparing it to this game's final boss. It was such a legendary fight because the story had such a build-up towards it. You originally thought Zan was going to be the final boss until midway through you realize, oh, never mind, Zan's a little baby, Ganon's here. Okay, here's the real challenge. And when you finally get to Hyrule Castle, you enter the throne room, but you're taken aback because Princess Zelda is there. And you question to yourself, how? Princess Zelda sacrificed herself to save Midna. Is this really her? And then you realize Ganon has indeed brought Zelda back, but possessed her, and the first stage of the final fight ensues. You have to fight Zelda under Ganon's command, and this was exceptional because it's not just a normal boss fight. You're fighting someone who you actually care for and are meant to save from the very beginning. So you attack, but at the same time, you're trying to hold back so you don't hurt Zelda. It just made for this very cynical clash in the player's perspective and added much more conviction to every single move. After you release Zelda from Ganon's grasp, you then enter stage 2 of the final boss fight, where Ganon assumes beast form and traverses through space and time, where you then have to turn into Wolf-Link form and have to properly predict where Ganon is going to appear from and strike accordingly. There was lots of trial and error that came from this fight. After this segment though, so much happens. Ganon is about to explode and destroy Hyrule Castle, so Midna decides to pop in and is like, hey, what's up dude, I'm gonna become the hero, and puts on the Fused Shadow and becomes a gigantic creature, and then teleports both you and Zelda to safety. Midna then pulls out a giant Spear of Twilight and delivers the final blow against Ganon. You think to yourself, yes, there we go, Midna is finally going to get her revenge against Ganon and defeat him once and for all. You then teleport to Hyrule Field, baffled and confused. And then you see Hyrule Castle explode and destroyed. And then, on the hillside, you see Ganon arising in his true form on horseback. And then he holds his hand in the air, and you see Midna's crown. Ganon then destroys it with one squeeze of his hand, and you realize Midna has failed, and you've lost your friend. Stage 3 begins where Link and Zelda ride upon Epona's back in a fight that occurs all across Hyrule Field. Zelda will shoot arrows of light at Ganon, stunning him to where Link can then come up and attack him with a Master Sword. Lots of proper aiming and setting up for Zelda to pierce Ganon's defenses led for critical planning and proper execution. After a few hits, Ganon stumbles off of his horse onto the ground, where he then rises and chuckles, and then pulls his sword from his sheath, where the final fight in Twilight Princess occurs. Stage 4 is a one-on-one battle against Link and Ganon. The two swords clash left and right, where Ganon just blocks all of Link's attacks, until the option to chance occurs, and both swords collide. Then you have to mash the A button to weaken Ganon's defenses, where then Link gets the opportunity to attack him. I remember smashing the A button more vigorously than I have in my entire life, and I'm pretty sure I will never smash that A button faster than I have at this moment. After a long battle ensues, Link finally gets the edge, and after a successful chance, weakens Ganon's defenses to where Ganon falls to the ground, and Link gets the option to finish him, where Link then does the hidden skill, the ending blow, and does a jump attack forward and plunges the Master Sword into Ganon's chest, finishing him once and for all. This is the coolest boss fight ever. Nothing will ever trump this. Not at all. Never. Nope. Never ever. It's such a powerful fight, and I don't understand how Nintendo could make something this perfect. See, this is why it's the greatest boss fight for me in history. Ganon seemed almost undefeatable. After many stages, I just kept thinking, he won't die! It's almost as if he is immortal. This makes for a sense of hopelessness and failure, letting that overall darkness of the entire game that I said earlier sink further into the player. Of course, however, every evil has a weakness and can be defeated. This just made for some of the best storytelling ever, and I compare this boss fight to every single video game, but for me, it's justified, and rightfully so. I'll always remember how legendary this fight is. Twilight Princess is just very unique compared to previous iterations in the franchise. Many people to this day want another Zelda game like it, but I feel if we got another game like this, Twilight Princess would lose its value. I grew up playing this game, and I love it so much. It was so impactful and helped develop who I am to this day. I remember my younger brother and I would take turns sitting down and playing through this game. And one of my favorite memories was when we were trying to learn the puzzle to get into the Temple of Time. We couldn't figure it out, so we begged our parents to let us look it up online and find the right answer. We wrote it down on paper so we'd never forget, and I still have the paper with the correct pattern on it to this day. We wrote this down in 2007, 11 years ago. It's just crazy to believe how long ago my first playthrough was, but it was wonderful and such a sentimental experience for me. While this game is not perfect, it's a wonderful one. The story of an ordinary man having his life changed in the blink of an eye is just so impactful, and I'm sure lots of people resonated well with this game. This game inspires us to be better and not fear what's to come. Even if our lives change in the blink of an eye, we can still have a happy ending. If you haven't played this game yet, I would highly recommend finding a copy. Enjoy and savor every single moment, because it's magical and inspiring. A true masterpiece. If anyone at Nintendo ever happens to watch this video, just know that I can't thank you guys enough for yet another wonderful game in this franchise and just another glorious video game in history. You are all incredible. And to you, the viewer watching this video, thank you so much for taking the time to watch the entirety of this. Whether you're interested in seeing someone's perspective on the game, or someone who has just never played the game before and wanted to check it out, I hope I inspired you to either go back and play this game, or pick it up for the first time. I hope I succeeded. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching this review and homage to The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess, 12 years after its release.